Hello everyone, this is Monster Tamer Bloba coming at you with another Kindred Fates guide. Today we're talking about what, in my opinion, is probably the most balanced kinfolk in the game right now, Embear. So, like always, let's start things off with the moves of the kinfolk. First up, we have Fire Burst, Embear's basic attack. This is a special attack, but like most basic attacks, it's not very special in the way that it doesn't do much besides just basic damage with decent range. This doesn't mean it can't be powerful though, if used in the right hands. Like all your basic attacks, it can see good use when your opponent is out of range of your other attacks, or your other powers are on cooldown. Now onto Embear's only buff move, Armor Up. This move raises the user's physical and special defense by one stage each. This move can be useful if you plan on getting up close with your opponent and doing attacks like Thrash and Fire Spin, or if you want to engage in trades at a distance. Like all buff moves, you need to make sure you have a safe space to use them in, so your opponent does not get a free attack in and stops you from buffing, and make sure that you remember that your buffs only last until you change Kinfolk. In the background, you should be able to see just how much Armor Up, a single stage of Armor Up, will reduce the damage from something like a Slifer's Bite. Next up is Explosion. This attack deals massive damage to enemies in a location. The main drawback to this attack is that it is both slow to charge up and easy to dodge. You need to keep this in mind when using this attack and try to catch your opponent off guard with it, maybe even while they're running away from your Scorch attack. Moving on to a close range power, we have Fire Spin. This attack deals damage and knocks the enemy back, if they get too close to you, that is. The damage and the range are both rather small in this attack. You need to time it just right so that you hit your opponent and that they aren't able to capitalize on the animation time of it. It can be tricky to use at first, but very useful when it comes to letting you control space and knock your opponent into an area you want them to be in. A good example would be knocking them back into a Scorch. Moving on to Fireball. This attack deals good damage to a single target. It acts more or less like a super-sized version of your basic attack, and can be used pretty much any time your basic attack would. The only thing I want to note here is Fireball has its own unique startup animation, and the projectile is very large, so your opponent may see this coming and dodge it if you're not careful with it. Unlike the basic attack, it also will stagger your opponent when they're hit by it. Next up, we have what is likely Embear's most powerful move, Scorch. Scorch deals fire damage to enemies and inflicts burn. The damage dealt is nothing to turn your nose up at, and at the end, the burn will deal a small amount of damage over time to your kinfolk, while also staggering them from time to time. This stagger can interrupt both movement and attack. A clever tactic suggested to me by Pexan from the Kindred Fates Discord is to wait for your opponent to get close, swap to Embear, and then try to catch them off guard when they least expect it. And now for the last of Embear's moves. So far, we have Thrash as the last move. Thrash deals 5 powerful melee attacks in a row. This attack also staggers your opponent, making it hard for them to get away or respond with an attack of their own immediately. Some uses for this move with Embear could be trapping your opponent on Scorch for extra damage, or comboing it with Fire Spin for a little extra damage on the side with your zoning. Now we're going to move on to general tips. Embear is a rather large target, making him easier to hit than most other kinfolk. There's something you keep in mind as well. While he is somewhat tanky, your opponent can burst you down if you're not careful. Try to use Embear as a burst damage dealer, switching in when your opponent least expects it. And if you're up 3 kinfolks to your opponent as 1, you can easily just switch to Embear and wear them down by trading them with blows. Also, unless they also have an Embear, you are likely to outdamage them. At this point in the game, the most useful items are Peach for Embear. It's the only item I can really recommend for Embear at this point, because it will help you stay alive both during trades and surprise attacks. And since Embear will often be the target of such attacks, this item can be very useful. Now we're going on to matchups. This time I was going to be doing something a little different for matchups. I wanted to go into more detail about Embear matchup versus every Kinfolk instead of just his best or worst matchups. First off, let's look at his mirror match. As Embear, one of the most dangerous fights you can have is with another Embear. If you're not careful, you can be bursted down very quickly. If you do it right, you can trade Embears with your opponents. If you do good, you can steal their Embear altogether. This is a very high risk and high reward strategy. Some things I would recommend if you want to try this is waiting until your opponent has used up all 3 charges of Scorch before swapping your Embear in and hitting your opponent with some Scorches of your own before running away and swapping out to a different Kinfolk. The next matchup we'll talk about is Embear vs. Kudoki. Embear being a fire type, his playstyle counters Kudoki pretty well. Kudoki can easily be zoned out by an Embear's attacks like Scorch. When he's cornered, you can hit him with an explosion and it's pretty much over from there, as he doesn't have many options in his kit to counter you with. Even his vine wall that he can throw up, your explosion can go behind, or your Scorch can make quick work of. Moving on to Lumala. This is something you need to watch out for. A Lumala can run out of your range and even at given time heal themselves. If you have the option, I would say swap your Embear. This trade's most of the time not worth it here for you. Sometimes you won't have that option though, and you'll have to fight. In which case I would recommend keeping the pressure on and don't let them get behind cover and get a heal off if you can help it. Put your explosion on their healing ray to try and get a sneaky hit and then close it down with a Scorch. It'll be a hard fought battle, but if you can stop them from healing and avoid Righteous Light, the laser beam attack, you should have a fair chance. Mechid being both slow and melee is something close to Embear's dream fight here. The only Kinfolk that Embear probably does better against would be Kudoki. You should be able to easily kite him around and wear him down with ranged attacks if he gets close with a few well-placed Scorches should do the trick. Now, it's something to watch out for with his rush attack, and if he catches you with Iron Fist, he can easily slaughter you with his basic attack. So that's just something to keep in mind. Mechid is not a guaranteed win for you. It's just something that you will tend to have the advantage on. Now for Shovelet. This can be a tricky fight. You have to really watch out for quicksand, as you have no real way to get out of it. Dig can also be used to dodge your attacks and escape your zoning. If you have to fight a Shovelet with Embear, do your best to stay out of the quicksand range and then close in after they miss a quicksand attack. Skulkin should be an easy fight for Embear. Just keep out of the range of his Caustic Cloud and you'll kill him from far before he becomes a real threat to you by just virtue of you doing more damage to him than he can do to you, at range that is. If you get close though, Skulkin can wear you down with Caustic Cloud and Wither both. And last but not least, we have Slifer, the Stealer of Peaches. Hide your peaches, people. Slifer is coming for them. There's nothing you can do. Run. Run fast and run far. But if your peach is already gone, or you're not using peach altogether, here's some ways you can fight Slifer. Scorch is invaluable here. Throw it down and stand in it. This will make it hard for Slifer to hit you with his melee attacks, so you can pelt him with ranged attacks. Slifer can still bounce or fling at you, so be on your guard for that. If the Slifer tries to trade his life for yours, there is little you can do to stop it at that point if your opponent is a particularly skilled Slifer. Although one thing I recommend is the Slifer might come at you and try to bite you while you're standing in your Scorch, but if you put your Scorches in a decent bunch together, you can run from one Scorch to the other when you see Slifer getting close. I think that about covers what I want to say about Embear. Please leave a comment if you have any questions or tips of your own to leave. This has been Monster Tamer Bloba. Thank you for checking my guide out. I hope you all have a wonderful day. Goodbye, and God bless.